Obviously.
Thank you.
Are we on?
Yep.
Thank you. All right. Few technical difficulties, all resolved by the infamous Jamie Hunt. Work session tonight is a fifth Wednesday, but we are meeting tonight. The other Wednesdays, and we have a lot of work to do. Just a reminder for everybody in the room, the equipment, which is relatively new to us, is highly sensitive. Paper rattling, side conversations, all will get picked up. So if anybody wants to do anything, they need to leave the room. Also a reminder to myself, because I tend to talk at everybody while I'm up here. So no more microphones, but it's sensitive. Okay, allegiance, we just start. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States to the republic. Justice for all. Do the light is on? I don't see her. Okay. That's good. BD recovery for Steve White. And we are ready to go. Village manager is coming in on Zoom. Maggie, are you running the meeting? Is Aaron?
I'm happy to.
And what did you guys decide? Aaron, are you doing the meeting?
If it's easier for Maddie to do it, that's fine. Either way, I don't care. I just didn't want to. I'm coughing all over the place, so I just didn't want to get anybody else sick.
We're gonna have Maddie. We're gonna give Maddie the org today. See how she does. And if you really,
I am sure she will do fabulously.
okay.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Our first agenda item tonight has to do with the Youth Bureau. So Karen sent out an email this afternoon with all of the details, which I have a paper copy of in front of me, which I can read through, or if anyone has any particular questions. I know that Stuart has been working closely with Chima's office on this as well, but I can just read the email if that would be helpful. This is a last minute addition to the agenda. As you may remember, the board approved grant proposals for 2 Youth Bureau programs through the county's Invest in Kids program. One is the Water Safety Program in collaboration with Recreation Department. The other is Youth Engaged for Success, oh yes, after school program, which is in collaboration with the school district. We're also awarded funding for a youth sports program to be run by the Youth Bureau in collaboration with the Recreation Department, which is called the Ossining Youth Bureau Sports Program. Just as a reminder, programs are provided free of charge and based on income eligibility as determined and recommended by the school district, and community center membership is not required for participation. So with regards to what tonight is, this is, I believe, authorization to go forward with these on next week's legislative agenda. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is, Maddie, these were already approved. We had done, if you guys remember, we had discussed this a while back. The applications were submitted to the county. The resolution to submit them was approved by the board. The budgets were also approved by the board. So there's a $33,000 match over 5 years for the 2 Invest in Kids programs. And then there's no match for the 1 year, which is really an 8-week program, summer program for the youth sports program. So this is really just authorizing me to sign the contracts that we just received from the county. And we'll have a resolution on next week to do that.
So Karen, not exactly I think the total is right, but it wasn't exactly the numbers we discussed earlier in a call. And Stuart, are these the right? I think the total is correct. So, and I think the programs are great. I
misspoke when we spoke earlier, Mayor, about the programs.
Well, I saw your follow-up email, but let me just go to Stuart.
The water safety and the it's $50,000 from the county, and I think it's like $5,566.
Right,
that's exactly right.
For the youth sports, that's $29,000 from the county. The first one is a 3-year contract, so it will be 50, 55 for 3 consecutive years. The youth sports one, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that began on. I think that began in
It runs July.
No, it runs July through August.
January went to December 31 to August. Okay.
Yeah, well, the grant period, but the program itself runs 8 weeks, July to August. The grant period may be longer, but they've scheduled that program. It's an 8-week program, July and August.
So as I said, I think the total is correct, I think the programs are correct, the details just need to be correct if we're gonna do anything next week and not get caught with people.
Yeah,
It's all good programs, it's all for the youth, it's a good price, it's a good deal for everybody. We just gotta make sure all our details are lined up, so when we vote, pass, or whatever, or discuss it, that we have the right program, described in the right way with the right amount, that's all. I
So
mean, everything else
the
is fine.
email, the mayor, the email describes it. It's the water safety program, $50,000 a year, for 3 years each year. So a total of $150,000 grant. And then the match is $5,556 per year for a total of $16,668 total over 3 years. For similar, the same numbers are for the Youth Engaged in Success, the OES after school program, which we're receiving $50,000 a year per year for 3 years. The village match $5,556. Total grant award $150,000. Total village match $16,668. And then the sports program is a 1-year program, or the grant is for 2026, and it is $29,000 with no match.
Okay.
So those contracts
so
will be on next, a resolution to sign those contracts will be on next week's agenda.
Sounds good. Our next agenda item, I'm gonna invite Valerie to join us at the table, and also we have our building inspector, Bill Augustinelli, over Zoom. So the board may recall, earlier in this calendar year, we came to you with a list of 15 suggested small scale zoning changes. And we got about an hour in, and then the board said, "Uncle, it's enough." So we said, "Okay, no problem." So we're gonna break it up into some smaller chunks. So the good news about that is the chunk that you're going to see again tonight is the stuff we've already covered. So there should be at least some familiarity with 4 out of the 5 items. The reason that Valerie is also accompanied by Joe as building inspector is because a lot of these are items that come up in front of our land use board, both planning and zoning in particular. These are things that those boards and the chairs of those boards have recommended be considered by the Board of Trustees. Joe can speak a little bit from his perspective about how it's problematic running the building department. And Valerie, I know, and Stuart and Taryn and Calvert Sessions, our whole team have been working very hard to make sure that these address the needs of the land use board chairs, but also the village and the applicants as a whole to provide clarity. So everyone should have a packet in front of them that has red and black writing and then yellow up on top. I know that we have someone in the audience who's particularly interested in the lighting requirements. So would it be okay if we started on that one? Would anyone mind? No, okay. Valerie, I'll turn it over to you to introduce if you don't mind.
Right, tell me where it is.
Yeah, this is in the packet. 1, 2, 3, 4,
And then it has 270-34 on the top.
It has a big chunk of blue at the top that's a purpose.
Or you just give me the numbers,
270-34.
Thank you. All right.
All right, so with this particular section, there's 2 components. One is landscaping and one is lighting. So why don't I'll just walk you through what we're proposing, and then we can talk a little bit more in detail. The first is the landscaping. Landscaping, we are proposing to include regulations for lots that are subject to site plan review. And trustee Yost pointed out to me, and I agree with him because I noticed this earlier when I was prepping for this meeting, that the numbering where you see landscaping where it says 4A, everything else underneath that should really be numerical. So they're going to be a subsection for landscaping required for site plan review. I think trustee Yost raised the concern that this would apply to all properties, and it's not. It's really just for new site plan approvals. Specifically so that we are encouraging people, we're encouraging landscaping in terms of the landscaping that's actually gonna last, landscaping that actually makes sense in terms of the actual property. And then also landscaping that specifically focuses on habitats and improving habitats within the village. So a lot of these standards are standards that would, that we are requesting that applicants achieve. And basically, a lot of this is commonplace or best practice standards that are in other municipalities. And also when we review landscaping plans, we kind of look for these best practice standards, but this way at least applicants will know that this is what we're requesting.
Yeah, and something I should have said at the beginning for this entire section that we're talking about now, the landscaping and the lighting, is when folks come in with a site plan to see the planning board, we're basically, now at least giving them a template so they know what to anticipate, instead of having them come in with what they think is a great landscaping plan that they've spent a lot of hours working on, but instead, the planning board is the one giving them comments about how they need to change it. We can save them time and save them a little bit of money if we already tell them what it is that we
Right,
expect.
and we also find that a lot of times, a lot of applicants will have or architects will just do a landscaping plan and they will sometimes put invasive species on the plants, or they'll choose plants that actually don't work for the site in terms of heights and that, because that's just because they're not as as trained as a landscape designer or an arborist or something like that. So that.
Well, we go through this and then our eyes glaze over, well, not that, sorry, other people around me looking
Yeah.
on it, and I've only those things for 10 years, so here's the thing. What's the problem? How are we solving it?
Yes.
And the problem could be, it takes too long to get us. And what's the accountability, right? Like if somebody takes down 14 elm trees that they're not supposed to, here is what it now said we should do. But a problem could also be it's difficult to communicate this piece, or it's expensive to consumer, or it's inconvenient. I mean, problems could be anything, but it helps me
Yeah.
to understand zoning problem. What are we solving for, how are we solving it, and how are we going to communicate it so people understand, which Maddie just did as well, but it would be just helpful,
Sure.
okay?
So the problem we're really trying to solve here is that right now your regulations do not have any requirements for landscaping, and this is something that the boards are paying particular attention to, especially because of the fact of the issue with heat islands, tree canopy, and then also habitat degradation. So this kind of requires, and this sort of puts forth regulations so that we can make sure that all site plans have these types of submissions associated with them.
And how are we gonna communicate to the public? But because trustee Ossining, I've been sitting with you and the village manager, I don't know, every few weeks. You've been in some of the Joe's and others to discuss it's all great.
Mhm.
But as exciting as these meetings are about zoning, most of the population, most people don't really focus until they need to and it's a little late. So if you have thoughts about how, just incorporate them. I don't need a whole story, I just need, this will go into X, Y, and Z and we'll do it.
Yeah, so everything that we're discussing tonight, and I don't remember if we're calling this a module because we've already used buckets or something else, so let's just say module. Everything that we're discussing tonight would be a proposed change to the zoning chapter of the village code. So depending on how the board wants to proceed, we would do what we typically do with zoning changes would be, once the board is satisfied with the language as it stands for these particular sections, we could refer it or ask the board to refer it over to the planning board for them to do a review. At which point it would come back to this board for your recommendation, and then you could go ahead and call for a public hearing. If it goes through the public hearing, then it becomes a matter of law. For this one in particular, and I understand the concern about when we change rules and regulations, how is it communicated to Joe Q public? Things having to do with site plans are, I don't wanna say they're more infrequent, but generally somebody has enlisted a design professional who's familiar with our code, who's familiar with us. If they needed to get a site plan approval, they would have to have what's called a pre-application meeting with us. So we would, be able to bring these new this new legislation to their attention. There are definitely a couple of points early on in the process, but to your point, this isn't like when the tree law changes, it affects nearly everybody who owns property. This is not quite that broad.
Right, okay, thank you. All right, continue,
Okay.
please.
And I think with Pulte also gave me a little bit of feedback on a couple of things with some of the language in there, so I can address those and we can move on.
And one more that I just.
Sure.
For example.
Sure.
So my comments, just, I'll make it real quick, so for everybody else, so just kind of a question about the applicability, just the site plan related items. On item, which is currently K, right, which indicates when the plantings can happen.
Mhm.
Yeah, once again, this is one of those where it says shall, and then
Yes.
also gives dates.
Yes,
Construction doesn't always go by.
right,
those
but
dates.
planting typically should. And so we usually will allow for the construction to take place and then wait for the planting so that it's the appropriate time.
We actually just had an example of this, and I won't say what the property was exactly, but there was a component of the site plan approval that you can't get your certificate of occupancy until this thing is done. And the person said, hey, I finished, at a time different from what I anticipated. Am I able to, make an arrangement with the village? So I'm good for it. I'll do the planting that I promised, the planting that I promised to do. I'm just not gonna do it right now. That's definitely a condition that can be applied
Right,
to.
what happens is sometimes you will have property owners that want to get their CO and they'll just put plants in even in the dead of winter, just to say, I did my planting plan, and then they don't. Right, and then it becomes problematic because,
Understand, so is there a way to change the language just a little bit to make that clear,
okay, sure,
right? Because they're saying shall
yeah,
and give the dates,
Mhm,
that
right.
means it's only allowed.
right, okay,
So it's kind of that, and then the last one is, for everybody else, the last one in here, and, it's like the current language indicates that it's in perpetuity, so people like can't.
right, so we're
Like
gonna
if somebody
remove
wants
that.
to put it, like, if something dies, and they want to put a different plant, they can't.
Right.
Right, so that's. That's all.
Then the next component in this is the lighting. All right, so let me just take you through the two different sections, and then trustee Eustace spoke to me a little bit about the lighting, and so I'll talk about some of the amendments that make. So outdoor lighting, again, the issue is, right now you have no standards for outdoor lighting. And so because of that, it becomes problematic in terms of site plan review. Now, while we do require applications to submit photometric lighting plans, and we do require certain brightness of lighting, and we also require information on the exact cut sheets of the lighting that's being proposed for each and every, basically light installation in a site plan. There's no regulations in there that specifically lets the applicant know that this is gonna be expected of them. So this again would provide regulations so that they're aware of what the expectation is of the village in terms of the review of lighting and making sure lighting meets standards, so that we're gonna try to promote dark sky lighting as well as to reduce light pollution for, not only people that live here, but also habitats as well. Because there's more and more studies out there now that lighting is actually very problematic for nocturnal animals.
Okay, and this goes for what size housing? and
So this is specifically for non-residential mixed use or multifamily structures. So this is really focused on, again, for site plan applications and those types of structures in terms of non-residential mixed use and multifamily structures.
Multifamily.
So apartment buildings,
Of what size?
and it can be any size.
Any,
Well, it's 3 units or more.
Right,
Three
yeah.
did you want to add something? Are you the person that wrote about the lighting, or is that
Sarah is, yeah.
Sarah? Yeah, I'm pointing, I'm going over the person's part.
I don't think I had anything specific to add.
Okay, I was actually looking for your email, but I couldn't find it, but I remember seeing it, so it must have been sent to me from someone. Okay,
So, and I just wanna note that this specifically will refer to lighting that's part of an addition, modification, alteration, or otherwise installed after the effective date of this zoning chapter of this section. So I have to change that, of this section. So it's really meant for new,
Prospective.
right?
Yeah.
Moving forward, not necessarily replacement of what's there.
My but then my comment here was that, like, the way it was written, like 80% of the properties in the village immediately become non-conforming,
Right,
which I
You
don't
can
think
only
is.
do going forward.
right.
But when people replace, they might replace with different things, they might,
Totally.
so.
Right, and that's correct, and so one of the things we can look at the language a little bit more and maybe focus it specifically on like new site plan applications or something like that, so it's really clear that it'll be moving forward and it'll be new applications to the planning board as opposed to existing structures.
Thank you.
So on this section, I'm not sure if the board wants to go one by one, if, you know, you have any questions for Joe about how this applies to day to day, that's what he's here for, so I'm sure if you have questions, he's happy to jump in.
The one other thing I just wanna mention, we are also proposing some lighting standards for single to 2 and 3 family residential structures. And again, I'm going to tweak that to make it a little bit, you know, I think trustee Yost was a little concerned about that it was a little bit too onerous, so we will tweak that again. Specifically so that it's clear that we're just trying to, make it so that the lighting is designed for the maximum extent practical to prevent light trespassing from the property, boundaries. And so I understand from his perspective that some of it seems a little bit onerous, and so we'll go through, reduce it, and then bring it back to the board to kind of achieve the goal, which is to prevent people from really having light shining into neighboring properties and becoming problematic.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
How do you determine that? So is it if I can see the light from the property or that the light is hitting? And I guess that's the tough thing.
Right, it is the tough, and that's one of the things that we can look at, probably trying to, if there's a certain level of lighting, trespassing the property boundary. I know this is something that Joe and I talked about, because this is something that Joe had a particular concern with, because they have a lot of calls dealing with lighting sometimes, especially with like in residential neighborhoods. I don't know, Joe, if you wanna talk.
Yeah, so
about
Joe,
the
what's your top 3 calls that you get in residential areas that are problematic?
Well, we've had some where mostly around like condos that are in proximity to other properties, residential neighborhoods, and sometimes the way they set up in the lighting is in the condo complex, mostly to light up, say, the walkways and roadways in. That they're in areas and now with a lot of the bright lighting, like LED lighting, that it actually is hindering or bothering the neighbors' properties. And since there was no really regulations on lighting for that, it was kind of, I guess, hard during site plan approval to take that into consideration when they were approving the site plan. And we've also had, I think,
Okay, so
one
that's
where,
one. What's the next one?
I'm sorry, say that again?
I said, if you can give us the top 3, so you gave us one, what's another one?
Is this complaints with respect to lighting alone
Yeah,
or
or
just?
that you get a lot of complaints, we're solving a
Right, well-
problem, you know, like that goes on to other properties and create problems. So what's another common call / complaint that you get from residents about lighting?
Well, sometimes I even get it from the people who live within the complex themselves, because the lighting it bothers them in their own apartments, not even just to neighbors. It's for the people that actually live on the property. Especially now when they change bulbs and stuff, and they're now using LED lights. They're too close to their apartment, and it shines all night long, and it disturbs them at night. So not having any regulations to any of that is problematic, even for the people that own the condo, their own condominium apartment within the complex. They put in those complaints as well.
I always am weirded out by condos, because technically, people who own condos are owners or
Mhm.
partial owners, and the complaint should go to their own
HOA.
condos, right, their own HOA, co-ops, they own shares, it's a little different. So one would think that that's not really for the village to resolve, but that's supposed to be resolved by then, but I guess we're setting up regulations so the condo boards know what the regulations are, right?
Yeah, this, I mean,
Yes.
well, for new condo complexes, so, yeah.
Existing.
Yeah, understood, but that's why I asked before, so if you have lighting and are switching to LED, that's actually where a lot of the complaints started coming, because the LED, I mean, including in this room where it became like, yeah. Crazy, it's like 10 times as powerful, but I don't think you consider that new, that sounds like a replacement.
Right, so, well, I mean, I think we've had one condo complex which had like major lighting replacements recently.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
you know, and we didn't have any regulations at that point to be able to say the new lighting should be X, so they were able to replace their lighting.
Okay.
But what we can do, and I think one of the questions that I wanna ask this board tonight, you know, we do have regulations for lighting dealing with, as he said before, like, we can focus on lighting specifically for new site plan applications. And not focus on lighting for like single, 2-family or 3-family residential structures. And we could remove those regulations and just focus on new site plans for larger developments, if you wanna start like phasing it in, see how successful that is, and then if for some reason you feel that there's a need for some of the residential structures, we can come back and amend that later on, so.
Oh, that's just months to figure out this.
I guess my question is the pace, to the mayor's point, fast enough for us to get the information? Our new properties, our new projects of this kind coming up soon enough for us to figure out, yes, this is working, no, it's not, okay, let's expand it. Because if not, then I would just say, let's keep rolling.
Most of your applications before the planning board for site plan approval are not associated with like single family homes or 2-family homes, right? You don't have a lot of major subdivisions taking place. A lot of it is your multifamily complexes, your mixed use and your commercial, so.
And we have
The
about
answer to
10
that,
of those
yeah.
a year.
So we will definitely have some, you know, some information within a short period of time to say, you know, has it been an issue with some of these regulations in terms of working that into the site plans?
And
So for me, it's the same thing over and over again with all our regulation. You're giving us a solution, I'm sort of hearing a problem. I sort of get the communication at some point, at least for the bulk. But the average resident, A is in the know. And they're gonna go and change lights because I don't know why, they're having a
Right.
party and then they let the lights off. And sometimes you can just talk to someone, and say, could you take your lights down? You did your party and now it's like, you know, Times Square in here. And usually they go, sure, okay, I didn't think it bothered anybody. But we're talking about regulations here, right? So how do you enforce lighting? Like it's like sound, we have a really hard time. We did all these regs about sound, a really hard time enforcing that, so how does that get done with lighting? Is what
Right, so I'm
trying to
gonna
say.
suggest then, if like, I think the easiest enforcement for lighting would be associated with site plan approvals and your commercial mixed, you know, those types of like buildings, because those are gonna be larger, they're gonna have probably more light pollution than other types of structures within the village. And they will have required to have lighting plans associated with those site plan approvals, so you'll be able to go back and say, you know, the lighting exceeds what it is that you proposed. as part of your project.
Right.
So Joe, what's your inspection process on a lighting plan?
Well,
Outside,
if it's a new development, and we have a lighting plan to use, then we would be able to do that as part of our final inspection. Also, when they apply for their electrical permit, the electrician is going to put on his application all the lighting that's going to be done, including with the site plan. So we'll have some sort of basis on which we can hold them to a standard on what they do with the lighting.
understand that, but do you go out there at night and inspect it?
Well, we would, yeah, I mean, but the
So
thing is,
why are we
if
passing
somebody,
something? Why are we waiting for a complaint? This is my point. Part of your inspection process should be a nighttime inspection. To
Oh,
make sure they're following through here. That's how you police this.
Well, I thought you asked how we're doing it now, and that's how
No,
we're
no,
doing it. Yes, yes,
Yes, I am. But what I'm saying is,
I think that's a good addition that we can.
you should add a nighttime inspection to make sure that this is following the letter of the law.
Yeah, and I mean, if they have a site plan approval and then, you know, after it's inspected and if it's in accordance to the approvals, if they change that and alter it and somebody puts in a complaint, then we can go back to that site plan approval and show that it's been altered and have
We can do both.
and hold them to it.
Understandable, but I'm not waiting for a complaint. So they build a new condo complex, let's say, and they get approved and everything's all above board. And is there a nighttime inspection to make sure it's right? I'm gonna say there isn't.
I think we could do that, but I think that the concern is everything's good until it's not, right? So we could do the nighttime inspection and then they're operating for a year and a half. And then some handyman decides that he doesn't like the way the lights look, and now we get a complaint, so now we're going back. Yeah, we can
Understood,
do both.
well
Yeah.
understood. Before we give them their CO, should be a nighttime inspection, make sure we're not flooding into that guy's property or going on. There should be some checks and balances here. This is all well and good, site plan approval, yay, that's nice. It's gotta be looked at.
Is that a condition we could include in the resolutions for site plan approval?
Yeah, I mean, sure, I mean, the conditions in the resolution for you, that allows the building inspector to go anytime they, you know.
So it would be both. It might be a condition in the resolution, but also a best practice of the building department.
We also
Yeah, I would-
generally have the issue that members of the planning board, if they want,
Right.
when they're notified that a CO is being applied for, can actually go to the property. So if they wanted to, they could go with the building inspector themselves and say, it's bleeding onto someone else's property. So it can certainly be added as a condition to any resolution.
Right, so
I know.
So it sounds like the board would be open to focusing on site plans. For the lighting purposes only at this point in time and, for residential, like single and two family, just leave, things as they are. And then we can always come back in the future.
I didn't get the part that we're leaving things as they are.
Meaning that, I'm sorry, meaning that we're not gonna regulate single family, two family homes in terms of lighting. It would just be focused on the new site plan.
For landscaping and lighting. So for any applications that, if this law is enacted, for any applications that come after, these would apply for people who need site plan approval. If someone's building a single family home,
Right.
it would not apply,
Right.
because it's only for properties that require site plan approval going forward from when adoption happens.
Right, is everybody okay with that? Cause I didn't think that's what we ended up. I thought we
Oh, I'm
were
sorry.
actually, like, it takes months to pass things and all that, so just go all in. Even if you can't regulate everything, the law will be there, so when we're ready to, you know, I thought that's what you meant by let's roll it out.
My feeling was, because this is having to do with what you just explained, that I would be happy to continue with single family, two family legislation to continue that conversation
Okay.
and not to wait. Cause I think what the proposal was, let's do this, see if it works, and then revisit single and two family. My feeling was, let's just keep going.
Okay.
Apologies, I heard the
Yeah.
opposite.
I
Okay.
also, okay,
Yeah.
I'm not losing it.
No, I know.
We're on. No, because it is within our realm of control when we enforce and when we say, I don't have the people power, whatever. Passing legislation takes months. I don't wanna come back to this, let's have it, and then we can decide, let's do a blitz and find out, you know, in the winter when the lights are, in the summer when people throw parties or volleyball games or whatever they're doing, but the lighting might affect, or complaints. Let's just get it all done so that it's there, otherwise we have to go through this whole process
Okay.
all over again. It's just more practical.
So then what I'm gonna suggest is I will revise the lighting standards for single two family. So to make it a little bit, not as onerous and a little bit more direct as to exactly what it is that we're asking.
Yeah, okay, we were all on the same page. Good, and you're right, you're gonna catch 80% back. But the other 20% will have to figure that out, but let's get this stuff done. Okay.
Just
Excellent.
to help provide some context, like
Yeah.
the example, one of the examples we were talking about on the single family homes. The way it's currently written, like a lantern light on either side of the door with a light bulb in it is out of code. Right, and that's not like, it's not kind of what we're talking about, but the way it's written, it would be.
Yeah.
So we need to just make some
Yeah.
adjustments,
Yeah.
things like that.
I mean, we don't wanna cost people money,
Right.
but, and I do think the LED revolution, which from an environmental point of view, has saved energy from a visual point of view. We have a common like, I mean, most of us who drive around are sitting there like, squinting. The
Yeah.
lights are super bright when they were replaced, with all good intentions. I'm like, nobody is trying to do anything wrong, but we need to just figure this out a little bit. I didn't think about animals, but now that I'm thinking about it, oh, that's gotta be really harsh on certain animals whose eyesight is so sensitive. Great, okay, what do we got?
All right, so let's go back to the top of the pile, which is one that the updates include clarification on the definition of story and half story. All changes are in red. So this is a single page. This one is a little bit more simple. Do you think it would help if Joe sort of explained the origin story of this
Yes.
one?
Yeah.
Joe, you're on.
So we're looking to kind of clean up the definition of it because obviously there's a lot of properties, a lot of buildings that are built where, we have the ground floor in the front of the building is on one level, and then the ground floor on the back of the building is a different level. So we're trying, and a portion of that is on the ground. So we're trying to kind of clean up the definition to clarify what is actually considered a story. And I think if I'm correct, Valerie, I think some of the ones that we have these properties where we had these issues was like on Main Street, where on Main Street you walk into the front of the building and you're essentially, if you're in the back on Central, you're essentially on the second or third floor where it's the ground level on Main Street. So I think in this case, we were just trying to get more clarification on what's considered a story.
You'd be pulling the one on the lower level.
So there's two different sections that we are discussing tonight associated with this. The first is the definition of story, where now a basement, garage, or structured parking is a story if the surface of the floor above is more than 6 feet above finished grade for more than 50% of the total building perimeter, or more than 12 feet above finished grade at any point. So in the past, we've had applications try to argue that, if they have parking, like structured parking, it doesn't count as a story because of that situation, with the slopes. And so we're saying now that it's gonna be a calculation, so it's clear what is considered a story or not. And then the half story, we also revised that definition so that that's a little bit more clear as to what's considered a half story. We are also, we're also proposing as part of, to answer your question, trustee Fritchie, in the VC, NC1s and NC2s, those are the Village Center and Neighborhood Center 1 and Neighborhood Center 2 zoning districts. It requires to have non-residential uses on the bottom floor. And again, dealing with the slopes, we are specifically saying that on slope properties, ground floor shall be the entirety of the floor area on the same level as the main entrance to the outside. So there's two different things that are trying to take care of that issue of what's considered ground floor, what's considered a story because of sloped properties. Because when applicants can, they will try to argue that certain areas of a building are either not a story or not ground floor.
If it's to their advantage, yes.
Right.
So we want to clarify
Yes,
that.
I guess my question is, you've got the ground floor,
Mhm.
then you, in the sloped area, and you've got a half of the floor underneath it on the sloped area.
Yes,
What are we calling it? Are we calling that a sub-cellar? Are we calling, is there?
so it all depends on how much of it is above grade. And so it could be a story if more than 50% is above 6 feet above finished grade. Or if it isn't, then it would be a basement.
Okay.
Which, by the way, is more conducive to what the state's the definition of that is, because New York State, under the state uniform code, pretty much has the same standards as what Valerie's proposing to do now.
Right, and that's one of the things that Joe and I also talked about, that it's easier to have those couple standards aligned just because it's easier for architects and also applicants to understand what's considered a story and for habitable purposes.
I mean, that's the entire Hudson Valley.
Right.
It's not just our main
No,
street.
it's not.
It's like every town
Right,
is on a cliff
right,
or on a slope. If you
Right.
have a straight driveway and a straight floor, it's an oddity in the entire Hudson Valley. I'm sure it's actually throughout all of New York State, frankly, but we'll stay with at least Hudson Valley. So, okay, I think this is like making huge progress. We started this conversation 3.5 years ago, I think longer, about redefining. This is like a big move because explaining, people call things basements, but they're really apartments. And the garage really doesn't count because, well, it's a 2-car garage, so it does count because you live in a 1,200 square foot house, so somehow,
Right.
putting measurements, you think, this is huge, I think, anyway.
Yeah.
The conversations, I didn't realize it fits with the rest of New York State, but I think that'll make it better for people who hire architects and stuff who say, okay, in our village you do that, but somewhere else. I do have a question to that in
Mhm.
context. I don't think it's as big of a problem in the town. But as we're going through definitions, as we're going through changes, are we communicating this as well, to the town and making sure that all of our things are copacetic, whatever we're not
Meaning the
required.
town of Ossining?
Yeah.
I think. I'm gonna
It's
say
a
that
courtesy.
the
I
answer,
know that
the
we
answer
don't
is
have to,
no,
but it's a
and,
courtesy.
and we certainly can do that going forward. Like if, going through the public hearing process, the clerk could also notice the supervisor's office. I mean, there are things we can do, but I think, to your point, Mayor, this board, in the past couple of years this has been a major undertaking that, I don't want to defame the town board or any other board, but this is a big task.
Very few municipalities take this on. We heard that 3.5, 4 years ago. Here's the thing. From a consumer point of view, we live here. Some of us actually know, because we pay taxes, like who we pay them to. Most people, not so much so. They live there 20, 30 years before they realize they live in a town, not in the village, they live in the village, not in town, live in the end. I think as a courtesy, you should let the attorneys for the town know that for 2.5 years, we've been making changes. It is on them to look at all of the changes that went. It's not our job, we're different municipalities. But for the sake of the consumer and without billing our own, it occurred to me that we should do this only when we're discussing condos, because so many condos are actually town. Town has a lot of condos, not necessarily as much. Village, we have apartments and rentals and co-ops. As a courtesy, you might want to inform them, but it's on them to look the stuff up. It's not on us to go through the whole process, because we pay consultants to do that, and they do, they should just benefit from it. I'm sure you guys will find a way to do it. It just seems to the people that live here that it might be a little bit, and for the architects and all that, but because the town and village lines are so weird.
right.
1800s or whatever they designed them before our time. Again, courtesy, and they should take it up, and if they don't wish to, or they can't budget for it, that's okay, that's fine, and they don't have to.
So that's item 1 and 3, basically
Yeah.
consolidated. So again, this is the
Right.
definition, story and half story, and then ground floor clarification. Item number 2,
What page am I on?
so this is the packet 27027 in the upper left and upper right. Proposed changes and approved exceptions to stairs and access ramp from setback requirements. This is our zoning board chair Kyle Agler's main goal in life, or yes, as far as I can tell. So from the trustees who joined the more recent quarterly land use board chair meetings, I'm sure that you've heard this from Kyle several times. We believe that, and conservatively, this would probably cut down on the applications to the zoning board by a third, I would say. And Joe and Stuart and Valerie can confirm or deny. But basically, on any given agenda, and the zoning board meets 11 times per year, I would say if there's 5 agenda items, at least one of them, probably 2, possibly 3, are people who are redoing, fixing up a staircase that's existed since time immemorial. They need to rebuild it because it's past its useful life, and because it extends past the setback, they need to come for a variance. They're not doing anything different than was there before, trying to improve the value of their property and make it safe. And it's a pain in the neck because they have to come to a meeting and often they have to hire a design, professional. But they also have to pay a fee to get on a zoning board agenda. They also have to take time out of their day. They have to send certified mail. They have to put a sign on their property. They have to advertise. If there is a way that we can exempt these particular items from that process, it is our belief that we should. Sort of as a public service, but also since we know that this comes up very often and the deliberation process before the zoning board is usually, thank you so much, you're approved. There's not really a lot of deliberation because they're so used to it.
What happened?
Maddie, just to add to that, yeah, because over the years, under the hardship of it, you have like the front yard, you're supposed to have a 30-foot setback, and right now our code doesn't exempt staircases, and the majority of properties in here, I'd say probably 80% of the properties, those staircases are within those setbacks. And obviously you have to have stairs, in most cases to get into the front door of your home. So when they present this to the zoning board, I would say 99.9%, unless there's something just extremely different about a property, it's approved within 5 minutes. So in most communities, most other towns and villages, the setbacks for staircases are not included in the requirements of setbacks. And if the zoning board is going to approve them pretty much every application, it's very onerous to have homeowners who are just trying to maintain their properties and replace their staircases to have to go through this entire application process to get a zoning variance, which essentially is approved within 5 minutes.
Let me just point a few things out. First, it does not apply if the stairs encroach on village property. That would be a license agreement. And we have many properties in the village where that occurs. The other question I have for Valerie and Joe, this is not just a front staircase, it would be side, it would be rear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that's
So
correct.
And just to be clear, we don't rubber stamp when it goes onto property. And these boards that have been working, because I was in the meeting, I don't remember if you were in there, if you were able to make it when you meet with the chairs. And Bob Pritchie has been, on these committees as an individual. One of the things that also occurs that previous boards are worried about is the staircases are built to then build illegal apartments and more entrances, blah, blah, blah. But I think the boards that are in place have now had a number of years under their belt, so are staff to know the difference between the good actors and the not so great actors who are doing things. And so I think this really is something we're solving for, the 90% that are really just trying to improve things, make sure things are safe, et cetera, et cetera. And we do have some older houses on many of the streets, that over time and before we started documenting things, that things are built in a certain way.
For the Stewart's point, this is in a replacement.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask, Valerie. We talking just, if someone comes into the planning board or comes to Joe and wants to put a new staircase in,
Right.
would this cover that?
Yes. We did talk, you're right, so we talked about this the last time that we were hearing that question, did come up, I'd forgotten that. So Mayor, to what you were saying, right, if does the board wanna see a distinction between a replacement in kind versus a new staircase to access a different part of the property that never existed, but also is within the setback? Should those be two different
Things.
Yeah.
What you've got in this language is for a replacement, gives him the authority to, an administrative authority. It's just like the 10% thing we did, but if it's new, then yes, they should apply and try to get a variance.
But this code, as written currently, does not make that distinction. The board is asking that it would make that distinction.
Well, why did the zoning or planning not want to make that distinction? They know what's going on out there. Believe me, I heard them talk about all of the, why didn't they make a distinction?
Because
They're pretty good about
They
this.
were overwhelmed with what they were getting, and the biggest thing in front of their face was replacements. That's their biggest problem.
Yeah.
Right, so nobody probably even thought of.
There
Staircase
was one application recently from the that went before the ZBA for a new staircase. It was a new home that was being proposed. And the.
Oh, brand new construction.
Yeah, brand new
Yeah.
construction. And, they were planning to have like a little portico. And they ended up, the staircase itself was going to go into the front yard setback. And so they needed a variance for that.
Okay, so where are we going with this? So we're looking at replacement, I have 5 steps.
Well, what's written here
Replacing
is-
5 steps.
Is okay for replacement.
Okay.
How you wanna put the wording?
So we only want to grant it in the case where it meets this is an in-kind replacement.
Correct.
If you're building a new staircase, whether it's part of a brand new construction or whether I just want another way to access my roof,
Then they got.
then you still have to
They
go
have
through
to
the
go
whole
through the
process.
process.
Let's
And-
try that, yeah.
Right, and so we're gonna then specifically just wanna clarify replacement in kind. So if for some reason you already have a front porch, but you put a different front porch on, right, that might expand it, that would then require you to come to the
In
zone.
kind means the same,
The
but.
same exact, right?
This is mostly like a property maintenance thing, like
Right.
I have these stairs, they've been the same since 1960. I still need to get to my house, but these stairs no longer cut it, I wanna put new
Right.
stairs that look exactly the same, that get me to exactly the same.
Joe, just to clarify though, when you have replacement in kind, and with the ZBA, you absolutely send them to the ZBA every time?
And even if they're a replacement, because it's a new structure, the way our process is, if you're building a new structure, you have to meet zoning compliance the way it's written right now. So like
So this would change
if you took down,
that.
if you took down an addition and you put a new addition up, you'd have to meet all the setbacks. Or a front porch, but because stairs are not excluded in our as it's a setback rules, then you right now, the way it's written, if you replace the staircase with a whole new staircase, not just doing a little repair to it like the railing or something, if you replace the staircase, you have to get a variance if you don't meet the setback.
You're, so you were wondering if that's our practice now, and the answer is yes.
Right.
This would reverse that, so now if you're
If I
replacing
had a
in kind,
staircase,
you would be exempt.
I have a staircase going to the front of the corner, 8 steps, and they're broken, whatever, I'm replacing it with 8 steps to get to exactly where I was.
Right.
Including the stairs, it now includes it hasn't included it until,
And that would be
that's the goal,
administrative.
yeah.
As long as you're not fewer than 2 feet of the lot line.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
Right.
Then you need.
Right, cause I
then you
mean,
need
any,
to go in front, well, once you're
Right.
so close to lot lines, my feeling has been very consistent. What you're doing now affects your neighbors. You live in a community, we don't live on islands here, Ossining is not an island, so everything we do, take out a tree, you're causing a flood in your neighbor's basement, so when you get near the lot lines, we have to be sensitive about that. Over time, maybe
That's
we'll find
also,
someone.
that's also the time and place at the DDA meeting when the neighbors should come and speak on it.
That's right, because every time you change something, which is really the number one thing we talk to people about. It's not just your line of property, you live next to people, and you affect their properties at the same time. And so I think this is consistent with everything we've been saying. Next,
Okay, so the final one is, the one that's probably the most, robust, and this has come up with much more frequently, the past 6 months even, I would say. I would ask maybe Valerie to summarize this because it is somewhat complicated and I'm sure I'll look it up. But basically making sure that if somebody has a very large house, say, and it's non-conforming, that house. And one section of the house is unfinished, and they decide now that they want to make that a finished space. I have an unfinished basement in my big old house that's in the middle of a commercial neighborhood, but now I wanna finish that basement. We've gotten a couple applications now that have argued that that is not doubling down on the non-conformity because the space within the envelope of the house already exists. Have I gotten it right?
yes, and
Mostly.
your code, yes, that is correct, and the code right now allows for a 10% increase in the livable floor area of that dwelling unit for the nonconformity, and the ZBA gets a lot of applications looking to get a variance to that 10% rule. And there's also a lot of confusion as to how to really calculate that 10% rule. So it was specifically requested by not only Joe, but also the zoning board of appeals to really clarify that. So that it's clear as to how how somebody could get a variance for the expansion of a non-conforming use. Related to, basically a lot of it's related to residential. And so we worked with, I worked with your zoning board of appeals attorney, Linda Whitehead and Taryn Ramey, to come up with regulations associated with this, and also based upon current current practices that are taking place at the zoning board and how they're looking at these applications. And so specifically, we are proposing that no non-conforming use, and I'm gonna go through the different criteria. No non-conforming use shall be enlarged or extended unless approved by the zoning board of appeals. The enlargement or extension of a non-conforming use shall include any change in size that increases the size, scope, or floor area of that particular use. And that the zoning board of appeals shall make findings upon shall make a certain shall make a findings based upon the following, which is: one, the extension or enlargement of the non-conforming use will bring the use into greater conformity, which means we're trying to, so sometimes the zoning board is comfortable with expanding the non-conforming use if for some reason the bedroom was undersized, or the unit was undersized, or if there's something in terms of maybe something ADA compliance or some
If it
other
brings it
type
closer to
of, right,
code.
it brings
Yeah.
you closer to code, right? So that improves that overall quality of life. The other one is the extension or enlargement is limited to portions of the building or structure at the time the use became non-conforming, and they're clearly they can demonstrate intended and arranged or designed to accommodate the use. So meaning that for example, if let's say you had a basement that was clearly connected with a particular apartment, and that particular basement was of use, and you wanted to potentially maybe expand that, and allow for more livable area, again, so that it would make it into greater conformity and that there's a clear connection. And it's not that it was a cellar, now we're gonna turn it into a basement and then try to connect it with so that it's clear that that space was automatically, or it was already connected to that particular use when the building was built. The third criteria is
I
that,
don't know what went on here 90 years, I mean, we have
So
so
you-
little information.
right, you can tell a lot by the way a building is designed, how it is either connects or doesn't connect with that particular, with an apartment or within a structure. And that's something that the applicant will also have to provide additional information on. I mean, there is a high bar in terms of allowing an increase to a non-conforming use, but it's done that way on purpose. So that somebody doesn't, so that you don't have a lot of applicants coming in and trying to expand their non-conforming uses, The other thing is that the extension or enlargement of the non-conforming use will not cause adverse aesthetic, environmental, ecological impacts on the property or surrounding area, or would otherwise be injurious to the neighborhood or detrimental to the public welfare. This is similar to findings that the zoning board has to make in terms of other area variances or use variances, so it's just bringing that in. And then the last is the extension or enlargement will not result in any increase in the number of dwelling units beyond the lawful number existing on the date the use became non-conforming. So you're not necessarily turning, like, if it's a non-conforming two-family house, then it doesn't become a three-family house. So it prevents that, but it would allow for the two-family house, even if it's not conforming, to expand if it does meet these other criteria.
So Valerie, just to add to that, if I can,
Yeah.
so we've had a couple recently where attorneys that were representing the applicants tried to argue the fact that the way it was written in the code, that enlarging an extension was interpreted as though me putting an addition on the house to be able to make another 30% or something. But they didn't feel that the word, the way it was written, enlarge and extension meant if I'm keeping the same footprint of the house and I'm going to just finish off the basement, I didn't enlarge or extend the house, so I have the right to do it. And they actually put some, I think they submitted or they were about to submit interpretations to the board. So that was one of the issues that we had was some challenges over the way the verbiage was and what they can do. The other issue, and I think we've had some applications, Val, Maddie, if you remember, where people were trying to expand it by 90 or 100%, and ask for those variances for the difference of 80% because they were only allowed a 10% increase. So the board was starting to take a stance of, well, we'll only consider an increase if it extended over the 10% if you only have a apartment that's 500 square feet and the minimum by our code requires 800. So if you need to increase it by 300 to bring it to more compliance for the size of an apartment, closer to code, then we'll consider that enlarge if you're going 40%. So, but it was starting to become abused. And the other issue is that our code really didn't say if your 10% that you were allowed to extend was a one-time extension. So they started to be, well, this year we'll add 10%, and the next year we'll come back with another
That's what they
10%.
always do, right?
And then all of a sudden now
10%
we've
of what?
increased it by 40, 50% over the next 5 years.
That's another
And they
thing.
wouldn't have to get in front of the zoning board at all because they were always within that 10%.
But that 10% is 10% of what, Joe?
10% of the apartment size. So if your first floor apartment was 1,000 square feet, you're allowed to expand 10%. You can get another 100 square feet. Man, now it's 1,100. Not of the whole house, and that was another argument that I had a lot of
No,
challenges
within
about.
that. I think to say it sort of more simply and in a much less sophisticated way than Joe or Valerie has. Basically, this is trying to do two things. One is if properties are non-conforming, the zoning board may not, or is not supposed to, suggest or encourage people to continue investing in that nonconformity, because eventually non-conforming uses should go the way of the dodo bird, right? We don't wanna keep pouring money into something that doesn't conform. The other thing is, this particular chapter is being used to sort of insert density in zoning districts and neighborhoods specifically where the zoning code did not ask for it. And so the way that this is being leveraged is in a way that is creating more livable space, more density, on non-conforming uses where those neighborhoods do not necessarily support that density. So again, a much less sophisticated version, but just sort
Yeah.
of boiling it down to those 2 points.
Yeah.
I mean, right, the intent is really not to keep encouraging them to increase nonconformities.
And is this a one-time effort or is that in there?
So we did not put something specific in there, but that's because in this particular situation, or what we're proposing now, it's gonna be a lot more difficult to keep coming back. Because what's currently here now is, as Joe mentioned, that somebody could keep coming back and do more or less an administrative increase 10%.
And then 10 on the
Yeah,
10, and then 10 on the 20. yeah.
Where if you're going to increase even just by like 5% or 2% or 1%, you would have to go to the board and then make these very particular arguments. So I think you're gonna get, you won't necessarily have repeat property owners coming back before the board, because they're gonna actually end up having to go before the ZBA, and make your arguments as to why that particular extension is needed. And then there will be on record that extension was done, and so that if they came back again 2 years later, the ZBA would say, well, this is not, you're no longer meeting the criteria.
Because if they, 1,000 feet, and you get a 10%, they're 1,100 feet. They come back again, now it's 10% of
Right.
1,100 feet.
Right.
But the way it is right now, they would, the way it is right now, if they're within that 10%, they don't go in front of the zoning board at all. By right,
Would
they
it
can just
hurt?
increase it.
to have like for belts and suspenders, some language saying like if this variance has already been.
I would have to defer to the steward on that, because you might have changes in, like, for example, like your New York State Uniform Fire Code, right, that might require some other modifications some year down the line.
I also want to ask a question which is not entirely hypothetical. I have a commercial property, commercial accessory, let's say. It's non-conforming. I need to do maintenance on the property. The maintenance will slightly increase the non-conformity. The way this is worded, that has to be denied. So I'm wondering what happens, and I can't go into specifics with this board, but there is a matter that is very close to what I'm describing. So I'm trying to understand a circumstance like that. Joe, I don't want you to detail it, but you know what I'm talking about.
No, I was just gonna say, but the way that section is on the nonconformities, I believe the way it is written right now, only it pertains to residential properties. Because we had this issue in other cases, and it was, this particular section of the code didn't apply to them.
It's not word, I don't think it's.
No,
worded.
it doesn't specifically
It doesn't
refer
specifically
to,
exempt,
I mean, we can specifically have this refer to residential properties.
I'm just thinking because, the particular situation I'm thinking about, it might slightly increase the peak on the roof. But basically, it's not doing anything else. That's being done for a maintenance purpose. So the question in a situation like that is, if you use these factors, they lose. So I'm just trying to, I'm asking it I'm dodging it, but I'm just trying to ask the
So
question.
we do have section E, which says improvement to non-conforming uses. So what we probably might want to do is just make sure there's nothing in section E and section F that contradicts, and that we can look to make sure that it's clear on,
I think that's fair.
and then the enlargements and extensions, we could specifically focus on residential uses, because I think that's where the biggest issue is. Than the non-residential use.
Right, which is what I think it is right now with the 10%. If you read the way it's in the code now,
Yeah, the
it only
10%.
applies to residentials.
What happens with the landlords, LLPs and all the limited liabilities used for residential, but is there any difference in that category? It's still residential use.
Yeah, it's still residential.
And it's mixed use also,
Yes,
retail in the bottom.
right. I mean, we typically not, I mean, I think with that, like, so, for example, if you had a mixed use, let's just say you have a mixed use in a single family district. That would then, what we're proposing with the enlargements and extensions, they would fall, if we specifically refer to it for residential uses, that would be more or less a commercial use, so that wouldn't. That would not fall within that enlargements and extensions that we're proposing.
So mixed use is considered commercial.
Commercial.
Even though
However-
there are residential units. in it.
However, if we want to allow for that same flexibility for all uses, I can work with Stuart to make sure that the issue of maintenance, right, is like, does have like an exception into that situation.
Could it be written in a way that the enlargements and extensions apply to any residential use, including in a mixed use?
Yeah, we could do that too.
It's a good idea.
That way,
We're getting a nod from Stuart to you.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
And
For section. Like F. Three, do they need to be all four of those?
That is the intent, to have them meet all four, for the residential specifically.
Also, Deputy Mayor, Val and I discussed this earlier before the meeting. The language we changed from the zoning board of appeals may be to a shall approve, because if those four factors are met, it shouldn't be a discretionary, it just basically should be done.
We're just looking to see what else we have to manage. Alright. Anything else?
So that's it.
Next week, you're delivering what, legislative session?
So that's up to the board. So the question that we have is everything that we've discussed tonight with the comments incorporated, do you want that to be in another work session? Do you want us to keep adding topics before we call for a public hearing? Or would you like to take this tranche and settle it and then move on to the next one? That one.
It's so much stuff. It's just easier to chunk down, by stories.
And I think it would be a recommendation of the planning board.
All right, so what we can do, Valerie, you and I we can put it together into what the code would be. And then we can have a resolution to refer it to the planning board,
Right.
so that you get onto the planning board's May agenda.
Right, and you might also, since some of these things, as a suggestion, since some of these things really relate to the items that the zoning board of appeals is seeing, maybe we can also send it to them for their thoughts too.
Good. And all of these was residential. Could you tell me, since I've seen add to this on the internet? And I actually throughout social media. So there's one family, two family, three family, etc. What exactly is a duplex? Like, I don't see the word duplex in any of them.
So our duplexes would be, well, there would be typically either single family attached or, or your two family home, depending upon, I think some of it deals with like the definition of like where the party walls are and then how they're being, how they're actually, like, so if a two family might be owned by one person, right? And so that wouldn't be necessarily be a duplex, but you could have like a townhome or a condo, and that would be more or less a duplex. That's why we don't really define duplex in our code because of that, because it's more or less based on like.
It just means two stories, right? But it could be any combination of ownership and.
There could be two apartments.
Yeah. Right.
In the same unit.
Joe, is the term defined in the uniform code?
No, there's none that I know of in the Uniform Code with definition of duplex.
I think it's like a style house more than,
There's like two of them for sale and they're basically two apartments.
yeah, which is more or less your two family home.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't really understand the word duplex.
I think if it's a real estate agent, they probably just.
Okay, so
kind of
there's no
threw it out
legal
there,
definition then, that people say, oh, it's not two apartments, it's not a two family,
It's like
duplex.
Right.
You can't say that, because there's no definition for duplex, is that correct?
Well, I mean, they could call it a duplex, because it technically is two units, but it's probably also a two family as defined in
When
ours.
the zoning board looks at it, they're gonna say that's a two
Two family,
family.
yeah,
Okay, it doesn't matter what you call it, you
Right.
call it like Joe Schmo,
right,
it's a two family, they're two apartments.
Yes.
Okay. Alright, so, cause I've just seen all of a sudden ads for duplex, and I'm like, that sounds great. Great, next.
So Valerie, is with us for one more thing that I think will be somewhat concise.
hopefully.
Hopefully, and if the board decides that it's not concise, we can move on and put this on a different, agenda. So, as the board may recall, with a big lift from, the planning team and the EAC, the Board of Trustees, adopted new legislation, I believe it was in 2025, changing the, tree, it's not tree prevention, what is it called? Tree preservation, law. And there's one final component that still needs to be decided on by this board as pertains to the fee schedule. So for purposes of, when someone is doing something on their property where they cannot accommodate a replanting plan on that particular property.
For site plan and subdivision applications.
Right, so not for a
just
single
regular-
family home, but similar to the conversations we're having about landscaping, lighting, this would be for larger assemblages, specifically. So if that, developer were not able to plant the trees that they needed to plant elsewhere on their property to the extent that the arborist requires, they would be able to donate into what we're calling a tree bank fund. So the Board of Trustees needs to help us to determine what amount of money per caliper inch needs to be donated into that tree
And
bank.
say caliper inch,
Pallet per inch, so that's like how fat is the tree.
so it's the diameter of the tree or the?
I think it's the
Be the
diameter.
diameter at like breast height.
So the regulations require that, and this is really about tree removal,
Mhm.
right? So if you are developing, so for example, 34 State Street is in front of the planning board right now. They are proposing to take down many trees on their property. And so as part of that, they are supposed to replace the tree replacement is 50% of the total aggregate of the diameter of the trees that they're removing. And so their landscaping plan will ultimately show that 50% replacement, or if for some reason we only get to like 47% or 45% replacement. And they want to then say, okay, well, that other 5% replacement, we're just gonna pay
Make up the
in lieu
difference,
of
yeah.
planting those trees. But right now, the new tree regulations allow for that to happen, but we just don't have an actual fee schedule for what that fee would be. And so we provided you some information on neighboring communities that have a fee set up per
If they're
caliber
cutting down
inch.
50%, how much are they keeping up 50%? Is that right?
So the
Yes,
50%.
I understand the math, but go ahead.
No, the 50% replacement is the 50% of like the amount, the diameter of trees that they removed. So
So it's
it's
not
just,
actual number of trees,
it's the total diameter, so you can have like, so that allows flexibility, right? You can have like a number of smaller trees, you can have some shrubs, ultimately it's up to the applicant to decide how they want to meet that replacement.
So Valerie's team has put together sort of a chart to give some examples from some of our neighboring communities. The town of Ossining does $165 per caliper inch. Newcastle is at $250 per tree, and then there's a maintenance buffer in there as well. Village of Dobbsbury has $375 per inch. So there is a wide scale.
There is. So what we did do was we had, I had somebody, a landscape ecologist, provide some information as to typically like how much a 3-inch tree, would cost, right? So a new tree would cost about $600. However, if you were doing wholesale pricing, they said it could be somewhere between $250 to $350, $350 range. So, and then a 1-inch tree for wholesale pricing is between $120 to $150. So we're just suggesting that the board might want to consider $125 per inch diameter growth height as the fee. So this would allow then ultimately, if you end up using the tree fund to purchase trees, you're getting to some extent a little bit of a one-to-one replacement of what.
do you think we should charge out of the 3 examples the least amount of money?
So I think what,
By far the least, not even close.
right, so I will explain more.
Okay.
So, having worked with a couple of the other communities where they were going through this, I think you'll find that sometimes it can become expensive. And so this helps reduce some of the cost. However, I also think that even with $125, I think you'll find that what I've experienced is that most people will try to be able to put the plants on site as opposed to actually wanting to pay the tree bank fund. Now, if you want to, I suggested the $125 based on the wholesale price. If this board wants to increase it, that's completely to your discretion. But I wanted to give you a price that I felt could potentially be replaceable on the market, but also one that is still high enough that wouldn't necessarily encourage somebody not to replace, right? So that it still would, they might as well put the tree in, because if they're gonna end up having to pay pretty much a 1-for-1 if they cannot, if we use
I
that.
must have misunderstood. According to you,
Yeah.
if I buy wholesale, it averages $250.
That, for a 1-inch tree, for 1-inch wholesale prices between $120 to $150, and I was suggesting $125 per inch. So it's almost a 1-to-1.
Or you can match the town at $165, harkening back to our
Right.
earlier
So,
conversation.
so, I'm gonna say this, go back to it.
Go ahead, Bob.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Um. So. 10% out of our state's 20 feet is the 10%, right? And they only put in 15 feet worth. They would always put in 5 feet.
Yes.
And the 5 feet at 125 would be $775. Do that.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's by inches, but yes, but more.
Well,
or less.
times five,
Right.
5 feet,
Yeah,
60 times 125.
So if you were to get a 3-inch tree based on the 125, right, let's just say $125 per caliber inch. Times 3 is $375, and I was saying in the wholesale price range. A 3-inch tree is somewhere between $250 to $375, so it falls within the range of you being able to replace. So it's not necessarily, you want it in the range where. If somebody puts puts money into the tree bank fund, that you can actually buy a tree with that.
For me, I thought that the rationale seems pretty good. I agree that it should be cut based on size, because we do have a bunch of old trees from. So I'd like to take that into consideration, right? And-
I mean, it'll end up being more expensive because you've
Because
got
they're good larger trees.
20-foot tree or whatever.
Your 10% will go high.
Yeah, right, so for me though, like I was, like. There's always inflation. So I'd rather start higher, so we don't have to raise the fee,
Right.
right? For the year, right? And so for me, I was thinking more along like 150, somewhere somewhere 150 around there.
Right.
To kind of take into consideration, the prices will go up and make it a little bit more of a deterrent and, some. I think costs, that's that
Well,
way.
the labor is down, so if you get a tree,
That's their problem.
half of the cost is. This rule is for certain sizes, it's for everybody in the municipality who's for.
It's for everybody.
Okay, so if I have one big tree, then I have to.
So
So it's very nice that you've chosen one developer, that it'll cost them a lot, but frankly. They should have known that, it's not like a secret that if you're gonna take down, 50 or 80 trees, there's. We don't make laws for a individual, we make them for everybody.
Right.
So on one end is I gotta take down 50 trees, or the school wanna take down who knows how many, 100-something trees. And on the other hand, is I've got an elm tree or an oak tree.
Right, so
So-
that would be, right, so that would be only for site plan, so this is for site plan,
Only
right,
site,
yeah,
okay.
so if you have your elm tree, you would go your normal tree permit.
None of that
approval
changes.
process, right. The only time that there would potentially be, so for example, we had a clear cutting permit, which is somebody wanted to take down 10 different trees on a property. Right, and they went before the EAC and the village's arborist took a look at it and suggested replacing a couple trees, right? Most of the trees were dying and they agreed with that, but that's where like that replacement discussion took place. But for the most part, nobody, you take down a tree, that's okay, as long as you pull the tree permit and there's reasons for that tree removal.
And I think that a lot was trustee Yost's input, because when this first.
I know, well, there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was somewhat onerous for folks who were just like,
No.
this thing is dropping ginkgo berries all over my deck, I gotta get this thing out of here, like, and now he's gonna, yeah.
Oh, but everything else,
I'm fine with matching what the town is,
165.
because I think the higher you go, the more apt we're gonna. Replace trees.
What were you?
Yeah, I agree with Bob with going with the town. I was doing some research. I mean, this is like the most unnecessary conversation, but like breast height, why measuring at breast height?
So it's
It's your first Wednesday?
It's a common, it is actually a common tree measurement, so that you're not measuring it all the way at the bottom and you're not measuring at the top, because it gets more narrow, so you're kind of like.
shoulder.
I know, but you know, if they don't, if there's no such thing as.
5 feet from the ground.
Right.
I mean, they could have just done that.
They just have to throw that in there.
No, they do.
They just turn.
Yeah.
And this is actually removal, not cutting at the stump, because it's really for, it's to remove.
Right.
It's not. Okay. Okay.
I mean, I'm just going to
No,
ignore that.
Yeah, I feel it right away, because I'm like, I don't understand, people different heights.
Yes.
Yeah. Hundreds of different places.
No, it's a, but you said it.
Yeah.
If I ever, like those trivia, like TV shows, I'm now gonna know something that nobody cares about.
I mean,
I think it's fun. I think 165.
Okay, and that's it for now. Thank you both.
What else we got?
Good night, Joe.
Good night,
Yeah,
folks.
good night.
Thank you. Stuart, let's do that.
Andy, it's, we have, regarding, lead service non-replacement. And, Andy is doing this tonight for some of the technical stuff, but let me just give you a brief overview. The federal government recently adopted what's called the LCRI, which is the lead copper rule improvements as compared to the lead copper rule revisions from 3 years before that. The important thing now is that lead service lines have to be replaced. But more important than that is, it's not enough for the village to replace from the water main to the curb. But it also means that from the curb to the house has to be replaced. Not by the village, because the village is not paying for it. I will say that the city of New York got a few $100 million to do this. And interestingly enough, even when they went into neighborhoods where they were allowed to make these changes, they only had a 60% access rate of people allowing them into their homes. It is a very, very expensive process. It is a very time-consuming process. But as Andy will also explain, the more we can determine whether they have lead service lines, the better the village is in, because it will lower their inventory. And it will then mean less reporting that they have to do to the state and less work that they have to do. We're already doing, as you know, some lead service lines, but I can tell you that currently we have 1,144 service lines in the village. And these are really, Andy, if I'm not mistaken, all private, where we do not know if they are lead, galvanized requiring replacement, which is a galvanized steel line, but lead goes through it, or if they're copper, we just don't know.
Yeah,
And
they're
the whole
considered,
idea-
they- they're considered unknowns.
Right. So the importance of this local law will be to provide the village with a means of determining what those unknown lines are. The federal rules, which are approximately 250 pages in length, go into this in terms of access and no access. The feds have specifically not dealt with the issue of who's supposed to pay for this, although they indicate they think it would be best if the states or municipalities did. There is pending legislation in Albany for the municipalities to pay for these lead service line replacements. It has not gone anywhere to date. So right now, we have a circumstance where we have these number of lines. Most of them are, as I said, they're all private, meaning that they're going from the curb line to the house. And we don't know if they're lead. And we all know what the danger is of lead. We don't even, it's listed in here, but we all know that. So what this local law would do is it would require, as is required under the federal rules, 4 notifications to the property owner. 4 notifications made 2 different ways. It could be email, it could be direct mail, it could be a hang tag, it could be a phone call, basically saying, we need to get access to your house to determine if it is a lead service line. And frankly, and Andy, correct me, it's very easy to determine that. It's essentially a scratch test. And they can determine pretty quickly if it's a lead service line.
Sometimes,
and-
yes, sometimes it's a scratch test. Sometimes we can tell just by pictures.
So the idea is for us to be able to go in. And one of the things in this local law is that if the property owner essentially says, no, I'm not letting you in, we would be able to get a warrant from a local judge to authorize us to go in and determine if it is a lead service line. If it's neither lead nor galvanized steel requiring replacement, all the better. That home we can cross off the list, and it helps our inventory because then we don't have to report it that as an unknown line. If they, and if we determine that it is one of those lines, be it lead or galvanized steel requiring replacement, under the local law, we're telling the person you need to hire a plumber and you got 120 days to make the repair. There may well be folks who will simply say, I'm not gonna make the repair. And we recognize that. And so even though there are penalties imposed, we have in essence a fallback, which is that if and when the property is sold, it's gonna have to be done. And again, we would have to go through a warrant procedure, we have to do all that. But the fact of the matter is that New York City estimates that the repair of the service lines by individuals could be up to a $10,000 job. Interestingly enough, if the city were to contract for it, based upon what we have to do with bidding, it would actually be closer to $15,000. But the fact of the matter is that and Vandy, if I remember correctly, we have to start the process of identifying these service lines no later than 2027. And we have to have it basically done within 10 years. The idea is to do 10% every year. The more we can identify as being good, the lower that number comes down. But it will be at this time, unless the state passes something different, it will be the owner's responsibility from the curb in to make that replacement. And as I said before, simply the village replacing from the main to the curb is insufficient under the federal rule. You have to replace the entire line. And we would continue to have to report it. So what this local law would do is it would basically notify the individual, and the notification, which would be in English and in Spanish, would include what you can do while you may have a lead service line, flushing the line. You can order tests if you had to for your line. You can get filters or things like that. But basically explaining to those individuals, the idea of the access is so that our folks can come in and make that determination. Do you have a lead service line? Do you have a galvanized line? And if that's the situation, this is what you're going to need to do. Because we don't want to have any lead service lines. It's as simple as that. The prior rules had, I think, Andy, a 90% rule, basically. Now the state has, the feds have basically said, all lead service lines have to be replaced. It's as simple as that. As I said, the federal government has not taken a position on who should be doing it or particularly who should be paying for it. And because of that, we've included here that it falls on the onus of the owner. And there is no question it's an expensive proposition. We see how much it's costing the village to do its own lead service line replacement. But the bottom line is it's a significant health issue. And, it's something that, we think needs to be taken care of. And I found only one other jurisdiction in the state of New York that actually has something dealing with lead service lines, and that's the city of Canandaigua, where they actually had they have a similar type of statute. We've gone somewhat beyond what Canandaigua has done, but this is to essentially get the numbers down. As I said, we have 1,144 unknown lines.
Out of how many?
Out of a total, there are a total of 5,818 service lines.
It's 20%, right?
That's the total number of service lines in the distribution system. Andy, correct me, from the village's side, we're in the process of taking care of those issues, right?
Yeah, right now we have 212 services left. So we're just, we're systematically going through what makes sense to try and change out in areas that we're going to be paving streets. So we make that a top priority. Stuart, you did an awesome job on this. Okay, there's not a single municipality in Westchester that has this legislation, and the health department has approached me because they know you're working on this, and they probably want to share it with other municipalities. But one thing you didn't state was that we have the ability to shut them off so that we can get compliance. There's times when we leave multiple hangars and people are inside their homes and they won't answer the door. And I don't know if they're afraid of we're authorities, whatever. But if we have the ability to shut down the water for 4 or 5 hours, they're most likely going to call DPW and we'll explain to them, we've left multiple notifications on your door. Can you let us in? We just got to do this test. We need to visualize it. We'll turn the water on.
Andy,
That alone.
I've removed that out. I apologize because I did that really recently.
Okay, I didn't know you took it up.
No, that's okay. No, I'm catching you off guard and I apologize. I went by a lot of what the city of New York is doing. While the city does have termination notices for non-payment or they won't let you check a meter, they don't have a termination notice for a lead service line. Basically, the idea is to get access to the property, to get into the property. My suspicion is that if we had to get a warrant, I'm fairly confident we get it. And we would be able to get into the property and it would be a very quick check by the water department and then we're out. And then we just notify the person after that of what their responsibilities are then to remedy the fact that they have a line that has to be replaced. And that's what they would have.
So once that's determined, then what is the timeframe that they have to have?
They have to retain a plumber within 30 days. And they have to get the work done within 120. Both periods of time can be extended by the water superintendent or his deputy. Should also point out that for violations of this particular article, the water superintendent and his deputies will be authorized to write appearance tickets because they're the ones who would be going into the house. They were the ones who would be checking. So they would have the authority to do that. But the timeframes there, the board, if they thinks it's not short, long enough, can extend it, but it does provide that it can be extended by the water superintendent on an application by the individual property owner to get more time if they think that if they have trouble getting a plumber or if they just want to put it off because of other issues. But that's the time frame that's in here right now.
Stuart, can I add something? So
Please.
I mean, are we legal? I mean, because the health department said we have the authority, if we write the law, that we can shut them down for a determined amount of time and keep this out of the court. Is it a bad idea for us to keep it out of the court, to shut the water down?
I'm leery of shutting the water down in this circumstance. It's not a non-payment. It's not someone who is diverting water through going around the meter. It's not even a backflow situation. I recognize the danger of lead and I understand what the county is saying, but I don't agree with the position that we can terminate. I know even under our code, we say there are circumstances where we can turn the water off. I will say this. Even in the city where they do have the ability to turn the water off, that cannot be done until, first of all, there's been at least 3 notices sent. And even with the termination notice, it's 15 days before they'll actually do the turn off. So I thought that here it would be better, and even if it means that I have to go to court with a lot of warrant applications, I don't mind that, because it's probably easier for the judges. I'm confident we would get the warrant, because basically what we're saying is, we don't know what the condition of the line is. There's a known danger to having lead service lines. All we're going in to do is to check if this is a lead service line, doing nothing else. And then once we figure it, we leave, and then we'll send whatever follow-up notices. So I understand, Andy, what the county said. I was less inclined to do a termination here, because I just think it could potentially be more problematic.
So if we're gonna, go ahead,
Go ahead.
Justin.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
My thing is, so if we're gonna do this and we're gonna go through the courts, I mean, it would make sense to do, 50 of them at a time. I mean, we don't want to do this individually, and we want to make this efficient. And
I think the best way to do that is that if we have folks who have not responded after the 4 notifications, we get them, we group them into, let's say, a group of 10 or 20, and we make an application to the court, and we go that way. And, and I think that's a fair way to do it. And then, so we're not going in individually, which is both tying up the court, tying up corporation counsel, and tying up, the homeowners. This way we all go in as best we can, because it may well be that of the 1,144 we're gonna send notices to, a significant percentage will say, okay, come in, just come in and do it and get it done. I think having notices in Spanish will help for a lot of folks who may not otherwise know what the hang tag even says. But this way we'll just get it done. So I think, I think the 1144 is the high number. My guess is that after 4 notifications, that number drops significantly. So the number of cases we'd have to actually seek warrants in court would be, that much less.
Okay, so we're on the same page with this. A little bit more work, but I understand the liability. The other issue is so the board understands out of the 1144, they want 10% a year. That means that whatever that final number, if we could knock that 1144 down to 500 unknowns, they're going to say out of those 500 knowns, 50 have to be done per year. And even that's manageable, but 144 a year is just, it's so costly with building the plant and changing water mains and, painting tanks. It's very unfair. Some of these unfunded mandates are really tough. And just so that everybody's aware, our lead and copper system with changing the chemicals out and how we've reduced our lead numbers and our results are 40% lower than 2 years ago. So even if you have a lead service line, you're in compliance. We haven't had any failures once we've switched to the new chemistry. So it's a lot for us, but it's costly.
And one thing the law would also provide, Andy and I discussed this, if someone has a lead service line and there's a problem with the line, they can't repair that line. It has to be replaced.
Not conforming.
In a sense. They would have to replace it. So that's.
I actually want to table this and think about it. So I have a lot of problems with this. The entire conversation is about the municipality. I would imagine that in the highest taxed county in the entire United States, I don't feel we need to be the first for this race of yet another unmandated piece of legislation that has very few parameters, that very few municipalities are doing. And I don't know about anybody else sitting here, but it feels to me that if I owned a house for 20 years or 30 years or 5 years, and I live in that house, and I found out that government comes in, does a scratch test, and now I have to spend 10, 15, 20,000. I just don't know a lot of people that have 10, 15, and $20,000 sitting around to pay for plumbers and to change. And there is no way that I would agree that municipalities should be paying for this.
It doesn't in this.
So, well, it also doesn't say that it doesn't.
No, it says that it's paid for by the
Yeah.
homeowner.
Great,
It's
so
in
the
there.
highest tax county in the United States, except for 2 years where Nassau County was more highly taxed, where people have to find second jobs, we're acting like 10 to 15,000 is like not a big deal.
No, I'm not.
It's a very, excuse me.
No, I want to be clear. It's done for a very simple reason. The danger of lead in the water is a known situation.
It
And
has,
I'm not here, and I'm not, I think it's
Okay,
fair,
I need
because
you-
you're making a point, because you're saying that basically I didn't take that into consideration.
excuse
I
me,
did.
I didn't say that. What I'm telling you is you, Andy, and everybody else has to think about what it means for not the efficiency, but what it means to go to someone and say, let me into your house. There's a certain percentage, there's lots of dangerous stuff that we don't control, lots and lots and lots. And people buy houses, they live in these houses, and all of a sudden they have a $10,000 expense of 15. We have what, 10 plumbers who work in Ossining? You think that you can get all this done at a reasonable rate for somebody that owns a home? And so I find this like needs a lot more thought about saying to someone, let me into your house. And by the way, it may, if we find a problem, which is a certain, people know, anybody in any generation that's alive today knows that lead is a problem. It's gonna cost you, you get 120 days to find a plumber and redo this.
Have it done.
Have it done.
30 days to find.
30 days.
40 days,
So-
120 days.
I just think we have to think a little bit more about what $10,000 actually means. I understand what it means to municipality, the amount of work Andy describing and all that. But I have to believe that we have to start from the taxpayer and from the people that own these spaces and what this burden is to them. Give them incentive to let us in, because if the only incentive is that we may or may not find lead, and once we do, you're getting a ticket. We're gonna have a warrant, we're gonna give you a ticket, you have to do this next number. So at the very least, I think we have to really think through it, if it's a $10,000 average or 15,000. I guess it depends where you are from the curb, like if it's a few feet or lots of, and then having that much done. Simultaneously, it's not only expensive for the village, it's really a burden on individuals who have to do this. So I think we have to think through this process with the consumer and the taxpayer at the front of the line. And work our way back and say, what does it really mean for someone to let us in, find out that they don't have lead, everything's cool, yay, they're excited, but if it isn't. So if it's 20 or 30%, I'm really so happy that New York City gets over $200 million in free money for tax dollars that are paid throughout New York State and supplies them with money. But unless somebody's giving us some money to do anything, there's a cost of staff time, there's a cost of lining up all these projects that Andy described. I just think we have to, right, I don't mean you, I don't mean Andy, I mean, I think there has to be a lot of thought to doing this stuff. And what it looks like to come into people's homes. We have a very hard time getting into people's homes as it is. And so this sort of thing, I mean, at the very least, that we have to elongate the amount, you do construction work, well, 120 days doesn't sound like a lot of time to me.
4 months.
I mean, I don't know,
What do you do in the winter time?
like, it just sounds like a nothing. I mean, last time I tried to get a plumber, it took me 30 days just to get somebody to return my phone call. Let alone an expertise in something, their ability to do it, if there's 30 homes doing it at the same time, and there's 5 plumbers. I mean, I just think we have to think from the consumer. Lead's been dangerous, I mean, I'm not young. Lead's been dangerous since I was in elementary school to be talking about that. This is not a new item. And the fact that the federal government decides to have yet another mandated and our state is dealing with it, the Department of Health is thinking about it, everything's good, but nobody's actually saying who's paying for this. 120 days, what do you think is a reasonable amount, and how many people do you think have $10,000 to do this?
That's a short period, that's a short.
I didn't even think about the winter issue, because you were cut down by about 5 months right there.
Well, what do you, yeah, from December to February.
You can't really do the work.
You know, I mean, Andy, just real quick, I'm gonna ask the obvious dumb question here. There's no way, because it's. Your lines are what, at least 3, 4 feet? below grade?
Yes,
Coming from the curb box? So there's no way of identifying that line in that curb box.
Well, it sounds like they're
you broke,
on
you
top of
broke, you broke up there, Bob. What was the last thing you said about the curb box?
There's no way of, identifying the lines, the copper.
Yes,
or
yes,
the
there
line.
is. Yeah, so we do have a hydrovac excavator and we can get to a point, but 1,200 holes in the people's yards. If we get to that where we don't get compliance, they are suggesting that you dig up the easement in their front yard and
Right.
you would use the vac all and you'd get down 4 feet and you could see what's on either side. There's situations
Who's
where
there? Who's suggesting this?
uh
The state or the federal government?
federal government. And the state just follows the federal government and then the locals follow the state.
And is this federal law, Stuart, across the entire United States?
Yes,
What is it? I missed some news article about this?
2024.
I was just looking up what, like Columbus and like all the cities are throwing with it. So,
Well, they can't be happy about it. It's a huge expense for individuals. And, big cities might get money, maybe New York gets it, but in New York City, getting anything doesn't do any good for anybody here.
I'm in favor of tabling it, because I think.
I think we need to
need to
table
set
it.
up, set up parameters if this is gonna happen. I agree with the amount of money it seems. It's not just in the coffee case, I'm saying quickly, but, I just think we need to look at the amount of time, we need to look at the time frame during the year. Right, cause,
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
your scratch test, that could be done anytime, we get that.
But
But
the
the
fixing
actual
of the problem.
repair of the problem can't be done anytime.
Right. And look, it's not gonna be 100%. It's gonna be a percent, 20, we just don't know that percentage that gets left, we just don't know. The issue of when properties are being sold, it has to be done, that could be a starting point, because at least for the past decade, people have made money on the houses that they've sold. So asking someone and saying, listen, it's just like a roof, it's just like whatever, it's like oil tanks that are no longer being allowed because no insurance company covers them. All right, at least at the point where you're making money, you've got to include it. You've got to say, I know it's gonna be this, it's gonna be done. So that's an opportunity to get some of those numbers.
So that brings me to the question, Stuart, so my house needs to replace. Is that something that's brought up,
yes.
because it hasn't been done?
There's a provision that they would either at the closing have to provide a certification that it's clean, certification that they made the change, certification that the village has come in and inspected, or that it's still unknown. And if at that point, we still can't get in, we have to go through the process again, because the rules, and Andy and I have discussed this, the rules for a subsequent purchase are a little odd. Basically, within 6 months after the purchase, the municipality, again, in essence, has to start the process over with the new owner to basically, allow us to come in.
The sale of property, what I'm looking at is this is a $10,000 to $15,000 bargaining chip.
Well, no, which is why it's written into what's in the code now, what would be written into it, that deals with the ability to, at the time of closing, to provide this documentation, not only at the closing, but also to the village, so that we would know what has been done with regard to that particular property. Has it been taken care of? Are there arrangements to take care of it, or is it still an unknown?
Well, but the arrangement to take care of it with the right time frame, because most mortgages are 90 days, so you lose your rate. So you've got people running around very quickly.
Or it becomes a bargaining chip.
Right, or it's like the roof, right, or the whatever, and you say, look, we're gonna have this tested, you get that done quickly, scratch test, yes, no, boom, you're done. Yes, it is lead, here's 10 or 15, we got a plumber to say it's 15 grand, just like a roof. I'm not gonna fix the roof when you buy a house, but I'll give you, I'll deduct 15,000 bucks from the price. And at least we'll get, I don't know how many, cause we're gonna sell their homes the next X, but at least you got something.
Again, it starts the process over with the new owner.
Yes, but you've got to process over something that's documented already and tests being done already.
Understood.
I mean, you're closer to a realistic financial conversation, going to somebody's home and saying, you've got to do this, and this is the amount of time, and by the way, it's 10, 15, 20. It's not $1,000, is a lot. It's a burden, it's a true burden, it is, in some cases, will bankrupt some families. It's something we have to take very, very seriously. Talk about affordability, that's for homeowners is not an apartment building or a developer's building, you're talking about somebody bought a house 20 years ago, 18 years ago, whatever, they're stretched.
So I'll start with what I like. I like that we're trying to do something about this serious health issue. I like that. I like that the communication with the homeowners is multilingual, particularly for our community. I think it's good. And that's end of list. The pieces that I don't like have been mentioned by the trustees, but my sense is that the kind of breaking it apart, the identification, you're just trying to find out how many of these do we have, and then what do you do about them? To me, it seems like we could approach it in part to say, we're looking to have that identification, because that way we can go from the 1144, let's say it is 500. Then we go, okay, so now we know what the number is, we know what we're dealing with, what's gonna make sense for us in terms of actually going through with these things. Because the kinds of things that to me stand out that are not there are like, the mayor's point about it kind of being really focused, like financing, if they can somehow finance this cost, if the homeowners can finance this cost. If there's any kind of, now this is something that we would lobby our congressperson to do, but to have some sort of federal tax incentive for the homeowner that does this, to say, hey, if you do this, you get some amount of tax relief from your federal taxes, something like that. Something that shows like we're trying to not just give the stick, but also the carrot to get this done, because it's very onerous and difficult. And the kinds of things that we're looking to do to support people's health, from changing from internal combustion engine vehicles to electric, we're trying to do all these different things through the mechanism of government, saying like, we're gonna incentivize you to do it, you get the tax credit, but we also by punishing, by making it expensive. In this case, I would like a version of this, so I would be in favor of tabling it, but with the idea of finding ways of making it more owner friendly and supportive of trying to get them done, and focusing on the identification piece, because that seems to be the initial hurdle that we have, having so many unknown.
Yeah. The issue for me, the identification piece immediately, instantaneously triggers.
The way that.
Yeah.
So we should.
So we need to think that.
Part of it. I'm not okay with you having 30 days to get a plumber. 100. Andy, the identification part of it, we just did say that alone, and say out of the 1,144 properties, 200 of them show up. Good. Then that's great, right? Because that knocks 200 off the list.
That would be great. Like looking at these numbers here, so the board and I get totally where you guys are at, and I totally respect not going after the residents, because I know things are tough. And that Stuart, we might be able to change that timeline to be less aggressive, but I am on the same page as the board to try and at least get access and identify. Now, in the big picture, out of 4,400 services on the owner's side that we've identified, 68 of them have lead services. So of 1,200 that we are unknown, if you look at, there's only 68 for 4,400 services, we might be down to only another 100 or two. We don't know. So, it's. So in the big picture, as Trustee Fritchie said, can you get access to digging up the front curb box, yeah, we can. But if there's any way we can get access, and the mayor, I think, said something like, is there a way to promote this like that benefits them? I don't know if it's legal. Can you give them $25 off their water bill so you gave us access to their house, like some type of a promotion to get us into the places? I don't know. But I understand Stewart's side where, there's a whole liability issue too. Stewart, can we extend those timelines out? Like the board's asking, like, if we give them notice, can we say to them, you have 3 years to get this done out of the 10 years?
I just put the dates in almost like placeholders, so whatever, numbers you come in, well, same with like the fines. So there's nothing in the LCRIs that require a specific period of time. And it's interesting, Angie, you mentioned the idea of sort of paying customers. That's actually what the city of New York does now. If someone allows access to their property with something like this, they'll basically give them a one-time $50 off their next bill.
That's
City
great.
does that.
I'm okay with the access part of this. I'm 100% fine with that, because this helps you identify what's out there. And then the time frame to get it repaired, that's something that I think we really need to
It's what it
table
triggers.
and discuss. Right, well, don't have to trigger nothing, it's just gonna trigger a list that it's at 1100 or whatever number he has. If we knock 100 off that list, hey, that's great. That was a substantial difference in number of what was lead
So
services.
understood, it's
Then what
like
do you put
trigger
there?
the ones that have.
So
Yeah.
I'm okay with the access part of this.
Yeah.
As far as the replacement and the timelines and stuff like that, or incentives, or tax, whatever, and punishment. With that we need to really look at that. Because it's just, people just don't have that kind of money just laying around,
It's a lot of.
especially nowadays.
So
So,
I would also, me personally, I would like it to be like, if you let us have access in 2027, it's $100 off your bill. 2028, $75 off your bill. Just try to incentivize it that way, because we do have some sort of timeline that we're trying to work off of. In general, it's not like indefinite.
And I'd like to know why New York City gets hundreds of millions of dollars and no
we're
one
not
else
in
gets
New York City,
anything.
so.
I mean, it's just like, well, we have the same issue with Con Ed. For more than 30 years, they have gotten a disproportion until Westchester started suing them. And now we're at a different place. I just don't understand how things keep getting mandated in small villages with individual homeowners that account now for less than 50% of the tax base are expected to pay.
Are we okay
So
moving-
we have to do
Are
it.
we okay moving forward with identification part of this?
I'm not okay moving forward until we figure out what it triggers, once you identify something.
Or don't trigger nothing, we're just identifying it to help his list.
Well, you're
Give
saying
him something to work off.
establish a fact-finding process that
Correct.
doesn't necessarily have a consequence.
Doesn't trigger anything, right? It gives him a better list of what's out there. All right,
Okay,
it could be 400 services out of the 1100 that need to be done. I don't think it's that many. Cause I'm sure you can, I'm sure you just, but when a house was built, you know, a general, time frame when houses were built, when they use these lead services, correct, Andy?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. It could be down as low as 250 or 300. Getting the information is 99% of this.
but to get the information, you have to go on somebody's property.
Right.
And do a test.
You do.
That's fine.
So you think you'd like to allow the village to do that,
Mhm.
and once they find out that 95% are fine,
Mhm.
but those 5%, which we don't know which they are, what do we do with that 5%?
That's that we have to determine, but I wanna move it forward so he can have the information in hand for the health department.
It's a great point. And then, the goalposts are changing constantly on these laws. Like it's in the EPA right now that they want to put it on, they're trying to promote a law that it would go to the ratepayers. So everybody that doesn't even have lead service lines, they might be paying for their neighbor. They're changing these laws constantly. The fact finding is the biggest thing. You know what I mean? we need to figure out where we're at, and then we just keep moving forward.
I think it's a good starting point.
But do we need a resolution or a law for that?
Sewer, we would have to, I mean,
You would, if you're gonna look to get access and then potentially have to get warrants, you would have to have a local law for that, because it's
Right.
not, you can't just do it.
I was just saying, like, if you just ask people, right, to like, start with just asking.
it would be $100.
Well, you have to do, you have to do a minimum of 4 notifications 2 different ways. That's what the federal rule is. That's just gotta be done.
So we would have to do that anyway. Okay,
Yeah, which is provided.
Just under the same premise that we did before with one package.
Yeah. And then what happens when they don't let us on the property and what steps do we take and how do you do it equitably?
That's
Well, it's all spelled out.
It's actually, if I'm hearing correctly, the laws be changing. And no other municipality except one has spelled anything, DOB number 2. So I don't think things are spelled out actually at all. This is what happened with cannabis. We had laws, we spent hours, and then it wasn't exactly the way we wanted it. So, I'm trying to figure out if you do something, what it triggers for real, and what's expected at that point. We have the same problem. I mean, I do cannabis all over, but that's not costing individuals money that we're triggering. So I'm really concerned about the data causes something else to happen.
If
I'm
we
very
allow
concerned about that. What?
If we allow it to. Well, we're the ones that are gonna allow or not allow something to happen.
I don't think so, because
How
I
do
think
you
it's a
figure?
federal law, and I think that it's very easy, both of the federal and the state, to say that once you do this, this is what you have to do. I don't think, I don't believe that local government has as much power, as you think we do, over something that's actually a federal law.
But
That then
You wanna-
gets shoved down to the state.
But you wanna have the power on what's written here in 120 days. You're gonna come to my house and it ain't
Well, I
gonna
don't
get
want
done.
that at all.
I don't-
That was my reaction originally.
I'm
I'm trying to find.
I'm just trying to move this forward to give him some information. That's all. And we're getting in the weeds here. Pretty quick. and dry.
We have 10 years to get every piece of lead out of the owner side and out of our side and all the school districts. Up to this point, the schools we were totally out of. Now they're going to be pulling us water purveyors into the schools where there's tons of lead in the school piping, and we're going to have to deal with that as well. So it's something we didn't have to deal with.
Who's we? Who's dealing with that?
Water systems,
Specifically.
like whether it's the Ossining water system, it's Veolia, a private water system. Anybody who's a water purveyor that is the end provider of the water pipe going in is going to be responsible to make sure that this all happens. And it's just every day it keeps getting more and more. But the fact finding is the biggest thing. If we could find out what's out there, then we'll be prepared for the future. The timelines, we control the timelines right now, once we know how many.
So does the board want us to do the research on what incentives are allowable? And then come back and talk about what a fact finding process incentivized by that bonus as the deputy mayor laid out might look like? Just as a standalone conversation, here's what's possible for us to ingratiate ourselves in such a way that people will let us get the information we need.
yes. From my perspective, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody said.
Not every.
The love said he started that, that's one.
Everybody else voted here.
Andy, when did the 10 years start?
Say that again, Mayor?
Oh, it's starting in 2027.
Yes.
Yes, we have to have a plan by 2027. So that's why it's like the fact finding is such a big deal. And as trustee Fritchie talked about, the next step will be to actually, to actually dig up in front of their yards if we can't get access inside. You know, maybe we could expose, 15 curb box a day, so it's costly and it's time consuming, but
Henry, what are they doing where you live?
I have wells. But-
Is your municipality all wells? I don't think so.
Most of up in my area, it's like the only big municipalities that deal with it would be Poughkeepsie, City of Poughkeepsie, City of Newburgh, and they're all in the same situation. Now, there's municipalities across the country, when they did these surveys, just put everything unknown instead of like doing their due diligence with the building department and actually testing. And now I'm curious to see in the 2027 plan, what are they going to say? We have 100,000 unknowns, and we're going to replace 10,000 a year. It's interesting.
How many wells in this village? I know it's a dumb question. Huh?
I didn't.
I asked about the village.
Yeah.
We're talking about
I
the
didn't know
village.
we had any.
That's why I'm asking. Do you know of any, residential houses that are serviced by a well? In the village?
Wells in the village? None.
Okay.
Yeah.
Might be one I'm bargaining.
I think there's a couple in the town.
People start putting in. Okay, before we start a rumor about like, some people should now start going to wells, they're really using, yeah. Okay, what else we got?
Last, thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last was a technical change to the tax chapter, specifically regarding it's called SCREE entry. SCREE is senior citizens income, where they, and the other one is DRIE deals with disabled. Under the current code, the way this is, and I just want to point out, this is not a change in tax assessment, this is a change in there's an abatement in taxes. So under the current code, the tenant who gets basically gets their rent frozen, they get that benefit immediately when the Homes and Community Renewal makes the decision. The property owner who gets the abatement, under our code, they don't get the abatement. Depends upon when the tenant filed their application with the HCR. They filed it before October 1st, then it's the next taxable status date, January 1st. They filed it after October 1st, it's basically a year after that.
Right.
What we're proposing to do is to change it to basically when it goes, it should go by the date that the HCR makes its decision. And then it would be the next taxable status date after that, which would, because we've had a few circumstances where property owners have said, I'm waiting for like 18 months for this tax abatement. This basically would shorten that period of time. That's what.
I thought it made a lot of sense when I read it. Does anybody have issues with this? I didn't even know that was going on yet, so thanks for catching
So we
that.
will, well, it was brought to our attention by a property owner,
Of
so
course.
that's how we knew about it.
Okay, this sounds
And
like an
so
improvement.
we can get a resolution for that next week, and that's, I think, all we have on the main agenda. We just have a exec session, I know, on a matter of personnel.
Okay, we'll do that quickly. All right, I think we're done for the evening. It is 9:55. And do we have any motions? I don't think so. We're adjourned.
Just, yeah, we're going to exec, we'll just.
So we're going to executive session, so